Following one of the most brutal losses in recent memory for the Bengals, Jamarr Chase has come out and called out Zac Taylor and the front office. Following the game, when he spoke to the media, he blasted not only Zac Taylor and Duke Tobin, but his defense. To break down exactly what he said, discuss what it means going forward as well. Some comments from Zac Taylor himself that has fans absolutely livid and fired up. A ton to go over on this episode. But before we get into it all, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Bengals content. Your guys' support has been unbelievable despite a very disappointing game yesterday. You guys have been crushing it with the support, folks. Like I just mentioned, I had a video on it following the game yesterday. Horrible loss. You could argue it's the worst one in the Zac Taylor era, or at least one of the most devastating losses in the Zac Taylor era. The Bengals had all the momentum, and they come out. The offense shows up. Joe Flacco's looking really good, looking like prime Joe Flacco in yesterday's game, kind of. Not really, but really good Joe Flacco. And then the defense absolutely sells the game. You can see this here. There's a lot of different quotes to go over, but I want to start with this one here. Jamarr Chase, on if it's on him as a leader to help the defense find leaders of their own. And he started off by saying, "It isn't my job. I play offense, not defense." Now, this quote in itself, if this is the only quote that kind of was brought to our attention, you can probably understand it. And I'll preface this video by saying I don't blame Jamarr Chase for what he says here at all. I mean, he's been targeted a ton, the most, and he's making historic records for how much Joe Flacco is targeting Jamarr Chase. But regardless of that, he's been fantastic. He's obviously one of the best, if not the best, wide receivers in football. And he's sick of losing. There's been instances in the past, over the past few years, where Jamarr Chase has called out his team, called out some of the coaching staff. And you can see here, there's a lot of different things to go over. Now, Zac Taylor, we're going to dive into some comments from him as well. And it's been crazy, but first let's dive into this. So he says and calls out, whether this is calling out the team, whether it's calling out Zac Taylor, I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. But he said that this game should have been over. They just kept scoring. If you watch the full reaction, it basically dives into the fact that when they were up by whatever it was, 2 touchdowns, 15 points or 14 points, that the game should have been over. The defense should have been able to hold it down. The offense obviously did their job, and that Zac Taylor and the defensive coordinator should have been able to put together, I guess, a better game plan to win the game. And like I mentioned in yesterday's video, the Bengals defense right now is not just bad, it is historically bad. It is reaching historic levels. They obviously can't stop the run game. We saw Breece Hall explode in yesterday's game, and at a time where the game started with Trey Hendrickson being healthy, he wasn't actually healthy. He didn't look near 100%. He didn't even look near 50%, and he wasn't helping in the pass rush. He wasn't helping in the run game. He wasn't helping anywhere. And then, of course, you have Logan Wilson going out there and making some very lazy plays. And it's at a point now where fans have had enough of a ton of different things, whether that be Logan Wilson, whether that be, all their different defensive players. Obviously, Logan Wilson recently requested a trade. It's time for a change. A lot of fans are calling for Zac Taylor to be fired, but he also called out Zac Taylor himself. He was asked what needs to change for the Bengals to stop losing games, even when putting up a lot of points. He said, "I don't know. Ask Zac." And obviously, he's not wrong, right? Having to continuously carry the offense, obviously him and T. Higgins. And then, of course, you have the fact that the Jets offense, and even putting aside the fact that the Bengals defense has been bad for most of the year and really for the past handful of seasons, they didn't address it. Duke Tobin did not address the defense in the offseason, and that's something that Bengals fans have been pretty livid with regardless, because it was a clear point of need this offseason. The New York Jets are coming off of one of the worst games. I mean, Justin Fields didn't throw more than 50 yards, and then he comes into town in Cincinnati in front of the home crowd and puts on a display that, yes, he had some great plays. He had some fantastic plays, but he looked so good, Justin Fields, that is, because of how bad the Bengals defense was. And if you think that many of the other teams competing for a playoff spot would have let Justin Fields do that, you're probably wrong. And whether it was Justin Fields abusing his legs, and for a while there, the Bengals seemed to be playing a very interesting game of football. Like, they weren't pressuring Justin Fields a lot. They were perfectly happy with, letting the Jets get to third down and then hoping that they just, don't convert on third down. It eventually stopped working, and Breece Hall exploded for some points. You had everyone on the Jets. I mean, you saw their head coach celebrating as if he won the Super Bowl when they actually were able to convert a fourth down and convert a 2-point conversion that everyone thought at the time was ludicrous. They lost to a 0-7 Jets team without Sauce Gardner, without Garrett Wilson. So it makes sense as to why Jamarr Chase is upset. It makes sense as to why he's calling out his team. And I think more so calling out the coaching staff. I don't think he's actually necessarily full-on calling out his defense. And if you look at what Joe Flacco said, very different, right? Joe Flacco took a more mature approach, saying it's a team game. You can't just point out the defense, all these different things. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on that. They asked Zac Taylor about it, and he said, when asked about the defense post-game, "We need guys to step up." Asked him directly who he looks to as a leader, sir, and he basically just said that he's waiting for someone to take that lead defensively. Now, Trey Hendrickson, he's been out, so he can't and hasn't really been able to do that. hasn't really played great this year anyways. After his contract extension, Logan Wilson, not going to be him. He obviously requested a trade. Cam Taylor-Britt had a pretty bad game yesterday. Yes, they have some young guys. They have Carter. They have, some interesting players. They have Knight. But at the end of the day, they're going to have to find someone to step up here. And you can see here, Zach Taylor was desperately hoping someone on his defense steps up to the group. The Bengals' void of not having a DJ Reader, Mike Hilton type of player/voice is one of the many issues this season. Now, whether you want to point to having a lack of leadership defensively, whether you want to point to the actual scheme, or you can point fingers and blame Zach Taylor all you want, the reality is their stars are upset. They have a great offense right now with Joe Flacco, which is different than, of course, when you were running Jake Browning. That was much different. Now you have, of course, Joe Flacco. He's throwing the ball well. He's targeting Joe Flacco is targeting Jamarr Chase a ton. You're getting the offense involved. Defense. It has been really bad. And I think kind of lost in yesterday's game was the fact that they didn't have Sauce Gardner, their cornerback, or Garrett Wilson, their best wide receiver by far. They were also missing another wide receiver. Like, they really didn't have anyone there. That was, at the end of the day, without Garrett Wilson, without Sauce Gardner, they should have absolutely decimated the New York Jets. And they didn't. And Zach Taylor also made a comment that had people upset. He said, never really had a chance to break that game open. And that's what he said following the game, which is crazy because if you watch the game, not only were they up 2 touchdowns at one point, you're playing a New York Jets team, which has a horrible defense, horrible offense, and, by many, a horrible coaching staff. So it is bad. The problem is now you're 3-5. The Steelers lost yesterday, which bodes well. The Ravens won without Lamar Jackson, which isn't great for, the Bengals. And their playoff hopes, they're not all but gone yet, but they're getting closer and closer. And then now the question turns to, of course, when Joe Burrow is going to return, if they even push him, because the point was, his point of return was supposed to be mid to late December. If there's, if they're not in a playoff spot, I doubt they do it, though. There has been some teams in the past. Kyler Murray returned from an injury. Obviously, the Cardinals were in a much different spot. They weren't really going for the playoffs, but he returned just to get his feet under him and get his feet wet. They might do that. And to even make things worse, we'll have a full video covering this, but you can see here, another one of our linebackers suffered a hairline fracture to his fibula and is out about 4 weeks. So another defensive player to make things even worse is out now for the foreseeable future. Shaka Hayward. So let me know down below what your thoughts are on this, folks. It is getting really, really bad. And at the end of the day, Cincinnati Bengals defense on the cusp of setting an NFL record for how bad it is. It's been really, really bad. 502 yards to the Jets. And there's also reports coming out now that Joe Flacco is day-to-day. He should be good. We obviously saw him suffer a bit of a contusion there towards the end of the game yesterday. And then we had to see some very interesting crowd reactions when Joe Flacco came out of the tent and came back running onto the field, even though they were losing to the Jets. But that'll wrap it up. Let me know down below what your thoughts are. Things are getting bad. Our coaching staff is getting called out. Jamarr Chase is upset. And rock bottom, like I said yesterday, keeps getting worse.